on Men and Mountains.
All right, this is Jack Donovan, and you are listening to or watching PH2T3R, Pater, the Journal of Solar Culture. And I'm here today with two members of the Order of Fire, Kyle and Josh. And we're going to talk about climbing mountains and some of the technical aspects of climbing mountains, but also some of the spiritual benefits of climbing mountains and what it means for men to climb mountains, because that's a metaphor in itself. So I want to get started, but these two have done all kinds of crazy, had crazy hijinks. But they've been they've hiked together in Canada and also in I believe Nepal, something like that. So I'm just going to let them roll into their stories. As I've said recently, one of the coolest things about the Order of Fire is that we have a lot of really interesting members who have done really interesting things. And that's one of the things I'm really proud of. So great to have you guys here.
Happy to be here.
Tell the people the story.
Well, just so happens to be that it is 5 years to the day that I did my last hike on Canadian soil with Josh. We did this local, I mean, by my mind, a small hike. To other people, perhaps not a small hike. It's the Chief in my hometown. It's like a 700 meter. I'm going to be talking completely in meters for all of our height and distance estimates here. So sorry, Americans. But
yeah, Josh is actually is an American, but he's moved to Tasmania, and in order to fit in with the locals, he's purposely forgotten about feet and inches, and refuses to speak in feet and inches. So it's as if he is born there. So that is
correct.
Go on. Yeah.
700 meter granite cliff that you can hike up the backside. Took Josh and his wife up there as their last hike, just as they were about to leave BC after 2 years. Unfortunately, I had not met Josh at the beginning of his 2 years in Canada. Rather, unfortunately, right at the end, he posted I'd followed him on Instagram for a while, and he had made a good number of, posts, and I thought, oh, this guy's great. And I just kind of thought, oh, he's in Victoria, so I'll just, next time I'm on the island, I'll hit him up and we'll see if we can catch up. And then he made a post saying, oh, leaving Canada. So I was like, okay, well, we got to make this work. And said, I'm in Squamish, just north of Vancouver. Come on by, let me know. And then I'll let Josh step in here now.
Yeah, I think we'd probably been in contact for maybe a year or two via the internet. And I'd been rampaging all over Vancouver Islands, hiking, climbing mountains, exploring, that kind of thing. And it just was a lucky day when I was like, okay, we're heading up to Alaska. We're doing a 10-week drive to Alaska and back from lower British Columbia. And I was like, who's along the way who wants to catch up? And like I said, Kyle and I had been chatting, and he's like, yeah, well, let's catch up and go do a hike. And we did Elfin Lakes first, which is still just such a gorgeous area. Wonderful, easy mountain hike. And then we must have did the Chief when we came back from Alaska. So 10 weeks later, after that first hike. And that was only our second time actually meeting in person. The first time being incredibly memorable, not necessarily because of the hike, but because of the restaurant of choice. It was like,
again, it's like, I'll have to say it in Celsius. I mean, it was so hot. It was like 40 degrees in there.
Yeah, it was like 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And he's like, yeah, let's check out this little pub thing on the river, which happens to be made like a greenhouse in the direct sun. And so we're sitting there just dripping with sweat as we're waiting for a burger. And I was like,
quite frankly, I was humiliated. I was like, this is not a good first impression. And then I was like, so tomorrow morning, I'm going to drag you. I mean, it was only 11 kilometers each way, Elfin, but I'm going to take you up into the mountains to make up for this scorching hot dinner date.
Yeah. And it was fantastic. I mean, obviously the hike was good enough that 10 weeks later, when we came back through, we arranged another one. And it was on that hike up the Chief, which is a very vertical but short hike. Includes some, what do you guys call them up there? Those little like built-in ropes situations, chains in the side of the rock.
I don't know what if there's a proper name. That wouldn't quite be a via ferrata.
Maybe, I don't know, man. But we, went up there, had some great views, and that being exactly 5 years ago today, apparently, according to the internet, we made plans for a bigger adventure.
Yeah, I was just like, hey Josh, we've spent what, 6 hours together in person? Do you want to go spend a month together in tea huts?
I was like, yeah, that sounds, sure, why not? Why not? And at that point, we were about to head back to Australia because our Canadian visa was up. I get back here, like, it must have been not even like a week or two later, and you're like, so how does next October sound?
Yeah.
Fine. Yeah, I'm free in October. Let's go climb the Himalayas. And we made it happen. About a year later from those first hikes, we were in Kathmandu, having a coffee and some yak meat or something, and then planning our adventure into the very, very high altitude Himalayas at Sagarmatha National Park.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna warm you up here, butter you up a little bit here, but it just clicked. I was just like, you know what? I think I could spend a month solid with this guy and not get tired of this guy. It was great. Everything about it. I mean, I can speak for myself at least. Maybe Josh had some misgivings about me, but I enjoyed all of our time together. Whole month straight. I mean, we took off October 3rd? 3rd?
Yeah, it was not long before your birthday. It was like
because it was my second birthday in the Himalayas that I've ever had, so that was good. And so I turned 26, I think. I must have turned 20. Yeah. So 26. In Tengboche, which is at about about 4,000 meters, give or take.
Yeah, somewhere up there.
4,000 meters above sea level. It was our fourth day of Diamox treatment for the altitude, which hit Josh like a brick wall. The altitude is crazy. I mean, I'm not trying to be like, I must be amazing, but the altitude never really hit me. The first time that I did Everest Base Camp back in 2016, I just went straight from Kathmandu, flew into Lukla, and then hiked to Namcha Bazaar, which is sort of like the main hub that all of the different valleys leave from in the Sagarmatha area. And I felt fine. But when we rolled into Namcha at the end of the day, I look over across the table at Josh. We're trying to have a tea, and he's just sitting there just...
Oh, I was dead. So just for some context for people who don't have experience with altitude. So we went from Kathmandu is around 1,500 meters. So
about that.
Yeah, it's not super high, but it's, I live at sea level. And then we went from there to Lukla, which is home of the most dangerous airport in the world because you fly into a cliff face and you fly off a cliff face.
It's like that.
Yeah, it's like you ride these little prop planes off the edge of a cliff and hope you got enough speed. So we fly in there, and that's at 2,200 meters, somewhere around there, I think. So almost 1,000 meters up. Flying out from Kathmandu. And then in general, they recommend that you only ascend a few hundred meters a day. So you usually try to go above your target altitude and then drop back down to where you sleep and acclimatize. So usually there's a halfway point between Lukla and Namcha, and that's where you're supposed to stay. Instead, I was like, let's live a little. I'll just follow Kyle up to Namcha, which is about 1,200 meters of vertical addition. And I was fucked. Like the altitude, I was murdered. I just chronic pounding headaches. I was sweating. I wasn't hungry. And if you don't know much about altitude sickness, like it can kill you.
Yeah.
Like you can die.
I was perhaps a little foolish about that. Just assuming that, because it happened to not affect me as much, that, it must be the same for everyone. But altitude is wild and it hits everyone very differently. It does not matter your fitness level. It doesn't matter your lung capacity, your cardio, your whatever. It's you won't know until you're up there.
Yeah, it's something in your genes. And I mean, there are ways to train, of course. But one thing I had learned after the fact too, is that there are people with really high cardiovascular fitness who are hit worse. So actually being more in shape can be harder for your body to adapt to that in some instances. That's not at all my case. I'm not a cardio beast, but it just floored me. And Kyle's up there. He's like, I'm gonna have some dinner, might do a little journaling, maybe, have a little jog around town. And I'm just like, I need to lay down. Yeah. And we spent a couple of days there acclimatizing. And it wasn't until the next day that I could actually eat anything. And it was basically from that point on that I couldn't taste food until we came back down the mountain. Because another thing with altitude is you can't taste anything.
Well, thankfully, all the salt and sugar and hot sauce is free.
That's right. Except those few places that charged us for butter and jam and shit when we tried to live off fry bread.
Oh, really? I can't even recall that. Maybe I was too distracted by how dry those potatoes were.
Oh God, world's best potatoes.
But I mean, I love it. Yeah, it's so magical that there's just, not to ruin some of the romanticism that some people might have about trekking in the Himalayas, but it really isn't like these. You're not backcountry scrambling through boulder fields and over glaciers and just hoping you get to a tea house. I mean, they are well-maintained trade routes that are basically a gravel road. And I mean, it's honestly, it's not even insane distances. It's the elevation that makes it damn near impossible. I mean, you're taking like 20 steps and you're just taking a full stop break, heaving, catching your breath. And we were about 10 or 12 days we spent above 4,500 meters.
Yeah, we were above 4,000 meters for, I think, 10 days. Yeah. And much of those was over 4,300 meters, I think. And then, because we did the Three Passes trek. Yeah. The main Everest Base Camp trek is essentially a walk in the park. You just can't breathe. Going over the passes and around some of the side treks are much less maintained. And then because you're crossing glaciers, the trails sometimes just drop off into space or disappear or melt. So there's some challenge there with trying to not die. But the main trek to base camp is basically like a fire trail or like a gravel 4-wheel drive track up to the base of the highest peak in the world. You can't travel far because your body shuts down.
Yeah. Multiple heli rescues from people who push on too quickly. So again, it's not worth risking. I don't believe that were we told that anyone had died during the season that we went?
I don't remember that. I do feel like that one guy who ordered a steak at the highest of the tea huts just base camp probably didn't make it.
Yeah.
So there's no animals are killed within Sagarmatha National Park, Mount Everest National Park, due to religious reasons. There's no meat up there unless it's been walked in or hauled in on donkeys for a few days, and then it's yak meat from who knows where. And some guy at what's the name of that? Gorak Shep, the last outpost before Mount Everest. Some guy was part of a trekking group there, and he got a steak, and like ate it, and then like everyone was cheering for him. I remember everyone like clapping and being like, "Oh, this guy's eating a steak," because it's like
And
the
he didn't put
godliest
two and
thing
two
you could eat.
together.
No.
Well,
So
I think
if
the
anyone dies,
last,
probably
oh,
him.
sorry. Yeah. Well, I remember the night prior to my in Tengboche when we ordered like the chicken stew or chicken soup or something, and then like took the first couple mouthfuls, and you were like, "Hey, don't forget we're like 4 days from where you're allowed to kill
Where
animals."
did that come from? Yeah.
Yeah.
Where did
But
the
there was
chicken
that
come from?
there was that great butcher shop in Namche as well that had all of the dried meat, multi-day aged, who knows how long aged.
Just sitting
But
in windows, like open windows,
yeah.
next to the guy trying to sell us diamonds.
And they don't quite have the finesse of say Italian or Spanish hanging meats.
It's just butchered animal of some sort.
Yeah, you order a steak, it's not like, oh, what cut of steak is this? Inside round, T-bone, like
It's meat.
it's a meat. That's a steak. It's a chunk of meat.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
Usually yak.
great. Yeah.
Oh,
But yeah,
funny.
so and what was the highest point that we got to, I believe, was it wasn't Gokyo Ri. I think that Kongmala, the first pass, was the highest, right?
Yeah.
5650. I think
Yeah.
it was definitely the
I think
highest
it
of the
was.
3 passes. I just couldn't recall if Gokyo Ri was higher or not.
No, it wasn't. It was just under. That's right, because we chose to do it highest pass first.
Well, and thank God, anyone who is planning on doing the 3 passes,
Oh,
you must go counterclockwise. Do not do it clockwise. Do not let any tour guide say.
Imagine.
Do not let them say that you will do. I'm blanking on the name of the last
I
pass.
don't know.
You want to go eastward first and then make your way west. Obviously, I mean, I'm mirrored as we said right now, but yeah, don't do it clockwise. You will die. You will not enjoy yourself. The aggressive
vertical ascent.
For whatever reason, I don't know if, maybe someone who's into geology could explain the plate tectonics to me, but coming from the west headed east, every single pass is like this. It's still steep, but you're climbing, and then the drop off to descend is just like a sheer drop with just switchbacks through boulder fields down onto a glacier. So having to climb that, and also for us, the final valley, for some people the first valley, as you descend down from Gokyo down into Tame, is a very, very aggressive slope incline with no towns along the way, so you don't have any intermediaries. But I mean, how many K did we cover on that last day? I mean, we went from Gokyo Ri at about, give or take, around 5,000 meters elevation down to like 3,500, 3,600 elevation. So as we're descending, we're just getting like the more oxygen in our system, we're getting more energy as we're descending.
Yeah, and that last day, I think we did something like 36 kilometers over the day.
That sounds about right.
And there was two peak moments that really stand out to me. You like that? There's two peak moments, and one was when I first saw trees again, because you take it for granted when you go a couple weeks without seeing trees, and all of a sudden you're like, holy shit, there's trees again. Yeah. We're low. We got below 3,500 meters or whatever it was. But it was when we finally got below, I think, 4,000 meters, we could think. So we spent almost 2 weeks being unable to think because of oxygen deprivation, unable to like formulate any sort of like complex thought and not realizing it. And we get to a point on this last day where we're trekking down at full speed. And as we're going down, we're gaining superpowers. Like, you just don't breathe for 2 weeks, and then you start making your way down the mountain. As the oxygen goes up, we're like invincible, absolute world's greatest high. And there was a point where we kind of looked at each other and we're like, I can think again.
Yeah,
I had actually forgotten about thoughts. That. Oh, that's such a big thing for me, because we're both like heading up in the mountains for this massive life-changing experience, expecting to meet and speak with the gods of the peaks. And then we get down and we're like, I haven't been able to think for 2 weeks. I haven't been able to taste food. You
kind of just go into survival.
Yeah. You pee out your body weight in water every day and you blow out a half cup of bloody mucus each morning out of your sinuses because the air is so dry, everything is just hemorrhaging blood and mucus. And then you finally get out of the altitude and you're like, oh, I remember my name now.
Yeah. Oh, it's weird.
Wild.
Yeah. I do have I should have thought to grab it for now, but yeah, I've got my journal from that trip as well. And and now that you're spurring my memory, I can recall you said, that it was like, I can actually maintain a strain of thought for more than 5 minutes at a time.
Yeah.
So you're just in survival mode, and you can see really how exhaustion and lack of oxygen leads so many people to die on Everest who are otherwise perfectly prepared. And who knows if we're getting any extreme athletes who are doing backcountry high elevation hikes listening to this at some point, but I understand it. I see why people just go, the peak's right there. Might as well just finish this hike and go for it. And then night sets in, you run out of food, you run out of water. Guess I'll have a nap. That's it.
Yeah.
But thankfully, doing the Everest Base Camp trek there and that whole Sagarmatha region, I would say you're never more than 10K from some sort of tea hut, and there's donkeys or mules, yaks, everything packing the whole time. So I really don't think there's much concern unless you're being really, really silly about the choices that you're making.
But you do lose that ability to think critically and make good judgment calls because you can't think. It's amazing what 30 to 50% less oxygen does to your brain.
Oh yeah. And that was funny about some of the calorie guys will get a good laugh out of this one. From the Diamox flushing your body out and you're pissing so much, we weighed ourselves before the hike, directly after the hike, and then it was something like I usually float around 175, 180 pounds now, even though we've been talking meters and kilometers this whole time. And after the hike, I think I was down to like 165 or something like that. So that was 3 weeks of trekking and water. And Josh was seeing how many calories of rice and lentils I was putting back every single sitting. And coming back after 1 week in Kathmandu, I want to blame it on being able to retain water in my body again, but I jumped up to like 185, gorging myself in Kathmandu on all the sweets, all the good food. Now that there was meat down there, there's breads down there that just gorged myself. It was magical. But the weight fluctuations are crazy, and it was really cool having Josh, who specializes in all this stuff, kind of be taking notes and doing the biometrics of it all and analyzing it. And
it's one of those things. Like, I was working as a professional wilderness guide at the time, so I was very trail fit, and I was much lighter than I am now, just on the daily, because of how many steps and kilometers I cover each week doing trail work. And because I think we were 14 days at on that trek.
Sounds right.
We took a 3-week trek and turned it into a 2-week trek, and then had a bit of downtime at the end to eat deep fried cheese balls. But in that 14 days, I lost 6 kilos of weight that I didn't have to lose. Some of that was dehydration. Some of that was just not eating enough, and
some of that was fried noodles.
Some of that was a very powerful 24 hours at 4,300 meters.
Very questionable hygiene.
Very
sanitation.
Spending a day over a concrete hole in the ground in sub-zero weather, purging due to some rough noodles. But like 6 kilos of weight over 2 weeks just from caloric expenditure, dehydration, and purging. It's like we lost just heaps of weight, and then it popped back as soon as we could eat and replenish ourselves. But the taxation on the body due to not just the workload of walking every day, but just the elements, the incredibly dry air, the lack of oxygen, it just depletes you. and it's just wild to see all that drop off.
But I mean, this is going to sound kind of cheesy, but it's just amazing what the human body just adapts to and works through. Like, yeah, there's a lot of times we're going over the passes, you stop and you're like, oh my God, oh, what am I doing? But you do it. You get up to the top and you're like, oh, that was amazing. Look at this. Look what we did. High five, couple shirtless pictures, phone on the tripod, and then you descend the other side. And that was probably my highlight of the thing, just in terms of entertainment value, was at Everest Base Camp. It's a little different every year. It looks like the past couple of years they've kept the same rock, but because it's on the Khumbu Glacier, it shifts and moves as melt and everything. Glaciers are living. And so there's this giant boulder that's, I want to say about 16 to 18 feet wide, maybe 6 or 7 feet tall and 10 feet deep or something, they've spray painted Everest Base Camp 5365 on it. And everyone's taking their pictures, but everyone's bundled up, right? Like they've got the scarf across the face to keep moisture in. They've got sunglasses on. They got the hat down. They got the earmuffs. They're all super bundled up. So it's like, how can you even tell what these people look like? And then Josh and I were like, hey, would you take our picture here? Yeah, of course. And we hand them the phone. Off come the shirts, and we climb up on top of it. The amount of people that just jaws dropped and are staring, and it was so good. I think we made some people's memories that night. Yeah, there were these two guys just stripped down at base camp. And to be fair, it's like, it's chilly. The wind is very biting, but I mean, when the sun's shining, it's cooking up there, because there's significantly, notably less atmosphere up there. So you will burn like immediately. Yeah.
And I got some pretty significant sunburns.
Oh yeah.
Where I had that gap. Yeah. I had a gap between my scarf and my base layer. And I had this like purple red just strip across one side of my neck that was it looked like raw liver. Like, it was just so incredibly torched.
Yeah. I mean, Josh pointed out to me, I didn't do this during my 2016 trip, but he pointed out if we just wore like a really thin buff or something, like just to keep some of the moisture of our breath in. So we were wearing masks long before it was cool.
Yeah, but for actual survival.
And see, we're all in dune mode, so like that's what I was thinking. As soon as you mentioned that, like with the little moisture tubes and like
a still suit in the Himalayas would be incredible. Yeah,
game changer, that one.
That's a good call. Yes. But and then I mean, so we hung out then after the hike. I mean, as we said, there wasn't much revelation up there. As much as you go into it thinking like this is going to be such a spiritual pursuit, your body's in such survival mode that you're not really thinking of like, oh, I'm at the top of this pass, 5,600 meters above sea level. We're exhausted. Our clothes are sweat through, so we're starting to freeze from the wind that's cutting through our sweat-soaked clothes. You're not really thinking of doing oblations and pouring one out for the gods and everything. You're just kind of like, it's beautiful up here. It's really pretty. Wow. And then you begin your descent, and I wouldn't say that I feel like I missed out on doing any of that. It's its own experience, and so you're in the mode. You're experiencing what it is like to be up there, which is fair and valid.
Yeah, I mean, these kind of things. It's the story afterwards that is really the experience more than I mean, I remember when my joke is that I was looking up the numbers just to see how high it was or whatever. But I got altitude sickness when I did Mount Adams, because I did it all in one day. So I went from like 0 to like whatever it is. It's like 12,000 feet or something like that. But and it was right after there's a false summit, kind of like there's a false summit, and I knew that there was. I'd read that there was a false summit, but like still like. I was doing it wrong too. Like, I wasn't really prepared because it was all a snow hike. It was all snow stuff. Yeah. And I had crampons, but that's about, and an ice axe that I didn't know how to use. And so I was really just climbing up that pumice kind of like volcanic rock for like hours and hours and hours. And that's the base. I was just crawling exhausting. I was just crawling over pumice rock for for hours. thousands of feet. And so I got to the top. I got to the false summit. And I just said, okay, it's like I'd gotten up. I was there at like 5 a.m. or something, and like there was like a middle place where people normally camp, and then it's like a little bit more reasonable. But I was like, I'm going to do this all at once, and then after the false summit is when I was walking around, and that's when I got a little bit of altitude sickness, where I was like, I don't feel good, and I need to sit down right now. Like, and yeah, it took a good like 20 minutes just kind of sitting there. I'm like, I can't go anywhere right now. And I just kind of pushed on. But same thing. It's like I got up there to take my picture at the damn camp thing, which is the whole thing. I'm going up there to get the picture. So like I'm doing, and I'm like trying to operate my camera and, like trying to figure it out because I'm like trying to do technical stuff. Was definitely a challenge. I mean, it's obviously not as high as that, but also like like I said, I did it all in one day, so I didn't have any acclimation.
Relative.
Oh well, I mean, I think Mount Adams is right around the 4,000 meter mark because what is there? There's 3 feet to a meter, so 1,200, so 4,000 meters, give or take.
Yeah, I looked it up. It's 3,700 meters.
Oh yeah, that's up there, so it's higher than Namcha.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was probably about 3,500 is probably when I got altitude sickness.
And that's where I've read that altitude sickness really starts to kick in. I hear a couple people around here on like 2,700 meter peaks go, oh, wow, I'm really feeling the lack of air here. And I'm like, maybe a little bit, but I've heard that 3,500 is about where you really start to feel it.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't really even expecting it or thinking about it. That was one of those things. Like, it wouldn't have been like, "Oh, I'm cool" because I got off to do. It was like, I might die. Hold on.
And yet you pushed through. You got the sick pictures. You had the experience. That's what it's all about for me. And
that's kind of I think a worthwhile point to talk about in the bigger picture. I mean, mountain climbing is such a metaphor. I mean, it's like, people use it in songs. They use it like, you climb that mountain, like it's an expression for doing something that's hard and overcoming it and going to the top and coming back down. It's like this ancient metaphor that, so to be able to participate, I mean, that is the spiritual experience of that, is be able to participate in that ancient metaphor of man and mountain and overcoming, all these obstacles and so forth to get up. As as kind of idealists, like as high as you can go, you're going to touch the sky, getting as high as things can go, So I think that's really, I think, where the experience is, I think, more than anything.
Yeah. I consistently still every time I go out, I'll get like, it's around the 2/3 to 3/4 mark when it's like, okay, there's the summit, and we've got some serious climbing to finish this off. And I start getting this voice. It's always this voice in my head, like, it's already noon. What am I supposed? Like, am I going to be back in time if I push through? Like, I'm pretty exhausted, and just shutting that voice down. And I know a lot of guys in the gym probably get that for like the last rep energy or the last set energy, but it's every time. It doesn't stop. Every time that I'm trying to go for any summit, right on that final push when you're above the tree line, you got like a cup of water left in your Camelback or your bottle, and then you do it, and just every step you're taking, I'm like, fuck you, come on, do it. And obviously it helps if you're going out with a buddy or a group of friends or something, because if they're pushing on, fuck you, I'm not going to be the last one to get up there.
Yeah, that's very helpful.
So, yeah. So, I mean, I don't usually go out solo anymore unless I know I have cell service. I've got 2 kids now. I probably shouldn't be taking too many backcountry risks, and there's a lot of spots around me that just don't have cell service for hundreds of kilometers. So, gotta be smart out there, folks. Make wise choices. Push yourself. Do cool shit, but just push that comfort zone a little bit each time. Don't suddenly drop yourself out into.
Don't just climb a mountain for the first time in a day.
Yeah, I mean, I think this would be this is the perfect segue into how I almost killed our other member Bronson, who now has moss and blood. I am guilty. I overestimate how different hiking is compared to other avenues of fitness. It's not going for a run. It's not lifting weights. It's not grappling. It's something of its own. And I just, because it's kind of my thing, I just kind of go, oh, all my other fit buddies, they're all in shape. They all do active stuff. They'll keep up with me. It'll be great. And Bronson, I won't go into too much details for him, but I mean, his quads were cramping so hard that you could see every individual striation down them. And he still pushed on up into the Alpine. He covered like 1,500 meters of elevation gain. And then he said, you know what, guys, not smart for me to continue. I'm gonna stay here. Sat under an overhang of some rock for some shade. Had some snow with him because we got up into the Alpine and he just rested. But damn near killed my buddy.
Well, you almost killed your whole fire up there in Canada too. When you recently were planning that trip for your ritual, you're like, "Hey, is this a good idea to make these guys who don't hike and one of them has a knee injury? Is this a good trail for them?" I'm like,
and it was.
It literally says one of the steepest hikes in the park.
Yeah, that's why we opted against that one. We ended up doing a different location. That actually, when we go back in 3 weeks now for the equinox hike, when summer solstice, we do the hike, do the ritual. I had just kind of scoped it out. Had never hiked in that area before, but I figured, okay, it's like 7 kilometers, and it was only like 400 meters gain, if that. So I thought, great, awesome, sounds good. There's a chalet up there, great cabin. Turns out that the trail maintenance groups or associations had only just begun putting a trail in there through the swamps. So there were these logs that were set up to become the cross planks for a walkway across all these swamps, but none of the cross planks. So we had to shimmy our way along soaking wet rounds of hewn log over swamp, and with our trekking poles off to each side. Oh, it was great. And they were fucking miserable by the time we got up there. And June 21st, but in the foothills of the Rockies, there was fresh snow. Snow had fallen the night before. So there was like 5 or 6 inches of soaking wet, slushy snow covering over the swamp. And so we're just trekking through. We're all soaked through. Lee's knee is just, he's doing well with the knee. I'm getting angry. I hadn't told these guys that there's this top-notch cabin up there, like a chalet that has a wood stove and everything. I just said, yeah, there's a structure up there. I think we'll be good to sleep in it, but bring your tent just in case. And so as we're getting closer, I can see the fury in these guys. They're like, this fucking guy has brought us out into this swamp, this snowy, frosty swamp. And he's still saying, like, I think the cabin's up ahead, guys. But yeah, I mean, we come around the corner. I'm like, told you. And a beautiful log cabin, split firewood, wood stove, everything. It was great. So join the Canadian Fire, and you can come along with us next time.
It's a good ad.
Yeah, there you go. Well, I mean, then it's good to have, especially if it's a first time thing like that, an ordeal. Men like ordeals. That's how they bond. Yes. Is they were like, oh, remember that time we had the you know, like obviously you guys had like, oh, remember how we couldn't think for 2 weeks, and you know, and you were shitting your brains out, and but
I remember.
No, I mean that's what makes memorable stories. I always say that's why a lot of guys. That's one of the things that attracts young men to power drink. Is that they create ordeals for themselves. That's what they're really doing. Now, climbing mountains, that's a better way to create an ordeal for yourself. But that's what happens when people do. When young men get together, they all like power drink, and then because they're all drunk, crazy things happen.
Yeah,
and then they make memories. You know, like they make stories like, "Oh, remember that time when you got that thing?"
Yeah,
you know, like
why not both?
Yeah. Well, you could get drunk and do high altitude hiking. That seems like it'd end well.
No.
Like in a skeleton aside with a sign.
Yeah.
And yet in Gorak Shep they had bottles of vodka and beer.
Yeah.
Only the Russians were using that. The Russians and the Sherpas.
I was going to say that was
they
the
can
first
handle
thing
it.
that came to mind. I mean, if you're Russian and you drink like a half a bottle of vodka every day, that's not really a thing.
We got some Russians and some Poles up there, and
Everyone.
cool.
I would say the most well-traveled like nationalities that are out there hiking are Russians, Austrians, Italians, and Israelis. Those are, I'd say, who we met the most of. Most of the Israelis were like taking a year between their military service or something.
Okay.
Wasn't I think that? So they were.
They do it. Yeah. They do a gap year usually after they finish their military service, and then they usually go disappear for a year with all their money. Speaking of Russians, I just remember that one guy we met. What's the outpost?
Best cut on a moose.
Yeah. The guy. Yeah, that's right. Best cut on a moose. What was the village with the little apple pie bakery?
That was up in Tengboche.
Yeah, and we met this Russian guy who did some sort of science work out on the Kamchatka Sea region. Yeah, like way out, like just across from Alaska, and he'd live out there and hunt moose. And he was very insistent that the best cut of moose was the nose and the upper lips. Yeah, haven't tried it yet. Don't have much.
I guess I'll
Tasmania.
I guess I'll find out if next year I get a moose tag.
Please let me know.
Absolutely. How could I not? Yeah. And then, I mean, it was, in terms of adventures that we had planned, what did we talk about when I went back to Canada, you went to Sri Lanka for a little bit, and we started shooting around the idea of like, hey, do you think maybe like next Southern Hemisphere, so next spring for Northern Hemisphere, we started talking about, hey, maybe we could do Patagonia in like, summer of 2020.
Yeah, 2028 or 2021.
Totally oblivious.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that didn't.
So
that didn't
maybe
work
someday.
out.
Maybe someday we'll end up over there. Down there.
Yeah.
You over, me down.
Yeah. It's a long way from anywhere.
Yeah.
Because we'd have to fly up to probably the US and then down through South America.
Really?
Yeah, because you can't I don't think there's any direct flights. It would be straight across the ocean for like half of the world.
Well, I mean, shouldn't you just be able to under Antarctica? Just kind of sweep
I don't
under?
think they fly that way. Maybe over to South Africa. I don't know if they fly. Probably go out to Perth and then maybe to South Africa and then over.
Oh, I just figured that was the joke that he was making. I'm like, no one can go over
Well, I was like, I kind of touched it a little bit. I was like,
I was like, I feel like he's going that direction with that.
No,
probably have to go from Antarctic post to Antarctic, like Hobart, where I live, Cape Town, South Africa, and then the tip of Patagonia. All are the Antarctic launching points to get to Antarctica. So I think there might be we can go from here to there, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
But maybe one day we'll get over there if we stop having children and buying drugs.
Well, that's kind of the thing, right? I mean, it really does go on a bit of a pause. So we've been talking about maybe have a meet halfway. Halfway is basically Hawaii. So
Hawaii is great.
Yeah.
It's
so
gorgeous,
maybe we'll do
funny
that.
mountains,
There's some good
volcanoes.
Yeah. Right.
We can hunt. We can
It's the
hunt
only
pig.
We have to have the order meeting, line it all up, everyone in Hawaii, all at that time.
Good idea.
That's where they're gonna get us with the direct energy weapon. That's what they're.
I fought the urge. I was like, do I make a reference to it? But okay.
I mean, it's right there.
It is.
It is. We are the direct energy weapon in Hawaii.
Yeah. Damn right. Damn right. Yeah, and the season's drawing to a close for me up here for hiking. I might try my hand at some winter outings this year, but there's just too much there's too much room for error on high peaks in snowy conditions, particularly early snow. It's easier to go out for a snow mission in the spring after it's all settled and compacted, and when things start to warm up and the snow is harder. I bought myself a brand new pair of used snowshoes off of Marketplace for like half the price. I was just like, can't pass these up. Didn't even use them last year. So we'll see. I'd like to do a couple snow outings just to try some new things, just maybe something that doesn't have insane incline. And Josh doesn't really have any real mountains down in Tasmania. You got hiking, but no real mountains.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's funny because remember, I brought Bino, our Nepalese acquaintance, down here after he came back from Nepal. He was visiting family in Sydney, and I was like, hey, well, come on down. And then I took him out to our mountains. And I was like, Tasmania is weird because it's basically Middle Earth. It's got that landscape similar to New Zealand in a lot of ways. And it's basically like we've got mountains, but it's just the top part. So if you think of like just like you got tree line and then craggy, rocky peak, it's like if you cut the top 1,200 meters off of all of Kyle's mountains and then drop them next to the coast, that's what we have. It's just rocky spikes. So there's not a huge amount of altitude, but we have that very quick transition from sea level to tree line to alpine and rocky peaks. So they're very visually stunning, but they're not very tall. You know, our highest peak here in Tasmania is 1,600 meters. And that's that day walk kind of thing. We've got peaks that take 10 days for you to get out to through the densest wilderness known to man, and then you have to like rock climb your way to the top. Like we've got a lot of that kind of thing, but we don't have these big, long, expansive mountains that you could walk up for days. Yeah. You can get to most top of them in a day, but they're very technical in some cases. So it's a very, very different landscape. We have a lot more just like super dense wilderness, rainforest. Just such a different landscape to either where we've been trekking in Nepal or over in British Columbia and Alaska. So it's an adjustment, but it's like, okay, instead of dealing with altitude, you're dealing with, you know, dense leech-filled rainforest. And so we have terrestrial leeches, so it's not like freshwater leeches. They live in the trees and on branches and stuff here. And so you go pushing your way through these rainforest leech-infested things to get to the base of this giant rock and then scramble up. Different, gorgeous, very otherworldly compared to a lot of the Pacific Northwest scenery. But yeah, nothing super tall. Even on the mainland, you know, our tallest peak in Australia is only 2,500 meters, something like that.
All right. Where is that? That's not Ayers Rock, is it?
No.
Or whatever the new Aboriginal name is for it. I can't.
Yeah, Uluru. No, that's just a big rock. It's a big rock though. Gotcha. No, we've got the Australian Alps up the east coast of Australia. So we've got a pretty significant mountain range. There's, you know, a couple little ski resorts up there. It's mostly sort of like, I'd say almost similar to more like Scottish Highlands. Like you got some decent mountains and peaks, but there's a lot of just being at higher elevation. It's not super drastic. But we've got some good mountains. Like Mount Kosciuszko is probably, I think that's the tallest, and I think that's just over a couple thousand meters. So we got mountains, but they do mountaineering courses and stuff up there, but it's just, very different. The continent's older and more worn. We don't have those massive sharp peaks
that have just been spewed out of the Pacific in the blink of an archaeological eye. Or I guess not archaeological, geological eye.
Geological.
Yeah, I'm enjoying this scenery I've got behind me here. I've lived now in this new area for about a year. I was originally right on the coast of BC, right on the ocean, and it's amazing how literally 2.5 hours, if you're driving with good time, you can go from that dense, rotten fern and moss coastal boreal forest into this interior plateau where everything's red and dusty and bone dry, hottest place in Canada. But what I'm loving about the novelty hasn't worn off after the first trekking season, because on the coast, all the mountains are like dense rotten deadfall and moss and ferns and everything that's like a straight up climb, and then there's cliffs, and it's like, okay, everything's much more technical and there's more route finding. Whereas here, yeah, it's steep, but I can basically just kind of walk up the side of that without much effort. So the expanse and the openness, despite it being mountainous, is just marvelous here. And I love the aesthetic, the more desert, the ponderosa pines, that interior feel. And a lot of the hikes that I've done out here lately have been up to ridge lines. I've gotten a couple definitely prominent peaks, but most of it is just ridge lines where you follow one of, a crest like that one up, and then you're just walking, and it's so hard to not just go. One of my main hiking buddies, we have a joke where we'll see another prominence like 3 kilometers down the ridge line. We're like, it's right there. We should go. We should do it. It's right there. And then the next one's just right after that. We should just go. And you can just go forever. And it's so addictive. It's so
really nice
addictive.
Terrain.
If you're a great terrain, but I meant like, being out there and pushing yourself in general. If I was not a father of 2 small children, I would be doing week-long through hikes constantly. It's absolutely, it's the thing. And if you warm up to it and you do just your first couple overnighters and then alpine overnight and then a couple more, yeah, it's all I itch for all through the winter. And if anyone's listening to this and you end up going out and starting to push your boundaries and do some more through hikes, definitely, tag me. I want to live vicariously through you. And it doesn't have to be, I don't want to see heavily edited necessarily. I don't always want to see just heavily edited, perfect takes with drone footage and everything. Yeah, that's great. But I can just look that up on YouTube. I really honestly like people's kind of, just them holding the phone, taking some pictures and giving us the walkthrough. It's much more down to earth. It's much more, that's what the experience is. It's not Hollywood level production with the perfect lighting and everything, which is great as well. But I really like just seeing a picture where you can tell like, oh wow, that's that little person next to that peak and that rock face that they have to climb. And it puts it more into perspective when it doesn't have the perfect perspective to it, in a way, like all the camera angles and lighting. The mountains is just magical. Once the bug bites you for bagging peaks and pushing yourself, nothing like it, in my opinion. Long ramble, but yeah, that's my thing, my bag.
Peak bag in my bag. Yeah. It's been interesting, like, because obviously I've moved a lot in the past few years. And, I was hiking a lot in the Pacific Northwest, which is more similar to where you were. Obviously that has its own look. You're going through the forest for most of it, and then you get exposed, and you're climbing up a little bit for the higher ones. I've been up on Mount Hood a good bit, and also Mount Adams and a few other ones out there that are like that. A few tough ones, but it moved to Salt Lake City, which is already like at a fairly high elevation. I think I looked at it, it's like 1,300 feet to begin with, or something like that. It's like the highway. So that's because of the way the mountains are out there. They're so steep. It's like freeway peak. And so like everything is nothing but like super advanced switchbacks. And I'll tell you, man, the Utah people, their version of like hiking is like different than like Pacific Northwest. Like you have this lovely little trail, and it's all like mapped out for you, and it's all like that. It's like there's a Mount Olympus that I did and over Salt Lake City, and that's one of the harder ones out in that area. And yeah, the last bit of it is climbing up like over rocks, like for a while. Like to the point where people are like, "Is this really the way? This isn't a trail. This isn't anything." And
damn right, it's not a trail.
Yeah, you'll see because it's Utah, you'll see then it'll be like a family of 8 will like pass you. Little children climbing over the mountains with their dog running behind, and like that shit happens all the time there. It's like, oh well, there's an 80-year-old man. It's very, very unusual compared to other like places where you go hiking. Like it's like whole family is just doing that because they didn't have anything to do today, and it's pretty cool. But like I remember I was climbing up Mount Olympus, and there's some like middle-aged lady who hadn't been climbing in years, like beside me. She's like, "I did this with my 70-year-old grandpa the last time I did it. I don't know."
Awesome.
So that was a cool place. That's a beautiful place. Probably a little bit more like where you are now, in terms of Utah. A lot of that dry grass, kind of vibe with everything. So you get the mountains, but also that aspect of it. And then now that I'm down in Arizona, Arizona trails are kind of similar, into the point where like, where's the trail? I don't even know. Like that's like I have to have all trails to even know where I'm going half the time. Like here's just a bunch of crappy rocks that I have to walk over. Like it's not like but beautiful trails. Kind of the opposite of where you guys are going right now is that I'm actually just going into the season where I could go hiking again. Now it's
finally cooling off.
Yeah. Because it's Dune. You don't go out. You don't climb a mountain like out here. I mean, because there are some pretty hard hikes. I mean, there was one that I turned back on because it was pretty intense. And I was by myself, and I was like, I need to do this another day. But it's called the Flatiron. It's kind of one of the big prominences that you can see from all around Arizona. Cool. I mean, from all around Phoenix area. But I mean, when it's 115 degrees outside, you don't go hiking for very long. Like that's
awful.
I mean, it's just, you don't go out for very long. It's because it's Dune. Like basically like, okay, take some water and go for a walk, but that's about as much as you're going to do. And then so now it's cooling off. It's just kind of starting to slip below 100. And so like that'll be, like once it gets to about 90, I feel comfortable with that a little bit more.
Fuck.
Yeah. I mean, but this is the nice season. Actually, it's funny in Arizona, like that if you go downtown or a lot of places, like the summer is the off season because everyone leaves.
Yeah.
And so like things are cheap and whatever. But right now we're going into, like, normally with most people, it's the kids are going back to school, everything calms down, whatever. But we're going into party season in Arizona because now it's like where you can go to have a pool party but not die. It's like you can go out and hang out with your friends or whatever, do all kinds of stuff, go hiking, do all these things. Cause once it gets to be like 90 degrees out, then it's like everybody else's summer, so it becomes fun,
So I know the American Thanksgiving is November sometime, whereas in Canada it's October, but are you having like Thanksgiving pool parties?
People do. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. I hate the style of when people try to import things that don't make climate sense. Yeah. Like in terms of like
come to Australia.
Oh yeah.
Christmas at the beach.
Yeah. Like Santa Claus things, like it doesn't snow here. Like, why are you making fake snow in your front yard and like doing little snowmen and stuff? Or like the autumn, I guess the leaves do change here to the extent that there are trees. I mean, there are trees like in developments and all kinds of stuff, but like out in the desert, not really.
Yeah.
So they're like imported trees. A lot of olive trees, actually. Like our whole development is actually olive trees.
They're evergreen,
olive trees, oranges, and limes everywhere.
Cool.
But
if I was just going to say, if I can take a sort of step back into hiking, a sincere question for Josh about how would you describe why is the energy expenditure of hiking just so massive? Like I don't track calories, and we've talked about not like, you can't trust what a watch says how many calories you burned necessarily, but it always ballparks like after a, let's say 30-kilometer round trip hike with 2,200 gain, it's saying like 5,000 to 6,000 calories burned.
Yeah, that's pretty standard. Generally speaking, so like when I was working on trails with a, let's say 15 to 20 kilo pack, not super strenuous in terms of elevation gain, but just long undulating trails. 5,000 calories a day is pretty standard. I mean, that's about what you would burn if you worked a manual labor job for the same amount of time. It's just movement. People don't move. And so then when we're like, oh my God, how did I burn all these calories? Or in the opposite end, why am I so fat? I hardly eat anything. Well, it's like because you don't use any energy. But as humans, we're designed to be basically burning that amount of calories every day through constant movement. And I did read one study that was done on Viking age food, and they were like, okay, so basically we calculated that people working in this climate at this time of year would be burning across a day in the like 6 to 10,000 calorie range. And so they're like, so what would they have to eat based on these historical collections of recipes? Like, what would they have to eat to actually maintain? So they basically looked at like people would have to have like an hour and a half lunch just to eat and maintain minimum levels of calories, because the energy expenditure, especially in colder climates with manual labor, is massive. And so if you're out there, and thermogenesis ratchets up when it's cold, so you're working hard to stay warm, plus the activities you're doing, plus you're going to be carrying extra weight, like the actual volume of work and workload is huge. So, I would say, generally speaking, if you are walking and you're ill conditioned, but you're walking consistently for a solid work day, 8 hours, especially on elevation or uphill or stairs, 5,000 calories would be a safe guesstimate. You do adapt and become more efficient. It's kind of like water usage. When you go on long hikes, your first day or two, you're really thirsty, but then after that, you get used to using the water more effectively, and you don't need to drink as much. It's the same with calories. It's the same with exercise. You become more efficient. You use less calories, but it's a combination of the fact that it's just a massive amount of work that we're not used to, and our adaptations aren't there, and efficiency. If you're not doing a lot, you're very inefficient, and you're going to burn more energy as well.
Yeah. That had me thinking about calorie dense diets and cold weather. First thing that came to mind was Shackleton's men living off seal fat.
That's it. Yeah, that's why all the cold climates live off fat.
Yeah. Fascinating.
I mean, if you really think about it, like, we always like exercise. Working out is really just a substitute for working because we don't work.
Yep.
Absolutely. That's all it really is. And when I was unloading trucks and stuff every day, the calorie expenditure of that, I'm throwing boxes all day long, versus now just I'm going to sit at my desk for like hours and do nothing. I'm really just going on the elliptical to make up for like you're not moving, really. But if you go on elliptical for an hour, to the extent that calculates your calories in any kind of real way, I mean, it'll put me between 400 and 600 for me just sitting there on my phone on an elliptical, So if you're hiking a mountain for 5 hours, I mean, that's harder work. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. I also came across a study about how out of proportion the amount of energy that your gastroc, your calf, can burn. And so I think it was one of the Huberman episodes or a Huberman post that it found that people who are incessantly tapping their feet, that constantly bouncing the heel, the contracting of the calf, burned on average 800 to 1,200 calories more in a day if they're just incessantly just that calf constantly going. So, little Tourette's, unable to sit still, just fidgeting and everything. Fidgeters have much higher passive burn.
That's actually one of the biggest correlations with the ectomorph body types. They find that people who claim to be ectomorph and they have a higher metabolism, it just turns out they just never stop moving.
They twitch more. Okay.
A lot. Just constantly fishing, doing things. And that's my tendency as well. Like I'm sitting here and I'm just rocking around in my chair. My legs are moving, can't sit still. And that just, like you said, can burn a massive amount of extra energy, which is sort of just showing the point of that whole neat energy expenditure, non-exercise energy expenditure. So steps and movement throughout the day really adds up.
Yeah, I even see that in my dogs. Like they get the exact. There's one that's 65 pounds and one that's 90, and they get the exact same food every day. And the one that's 65 pounds is spazzy, and he's always doing something. He's always around. Where Bruder can just sit in a spot and put pause on life for like 4 hours. It won't do anything.
Conserving
but, like,
energy.
like, yeah. He's always doing something, like, so, and that's, yeah. You do see people like that as well.
Yeah. Well, I see in the upper corner that we're at an hour. I don't know how long we're averaging for this, but are there any points that I'm possibly overlooking? Any questions that either of you think people might have in regards to mountain climbing, whether from I feel like I covered a lot of my feelings on it, whether it was particularly articulate or not. But even from like a technical standpoint or anything, I feel like maybe encouraging guys to get out there and do it. I think that I kind of had a offshoot of thought when I mentioned about Shackleton and how spectacular that book was, and thinking like, oh, that would be sick to be stuck in Antarctica for 2 years with the boys. Maybe not quite that much, but that
We're not doing that, Kyle. We're not doing that.
Ben will totally go to Antarctica instead of going to therapy.
But in regards to like that drive, like we all of us want to have a sick adventure, at least one crusade against ourselves, out into the world, do something amazing, see beautiful scenery, overcome ourselves, see some part of the world. And there's probably a lot of guys that live in the Midwest or something that unfortunately don't have mountains right around them, but I think pretty well every country is going to have some mountains that you can reach, some degree of wilderness. And it's a first step that you can do if you get out there and you just bag your first peak, get some elevation, see, as soon as you're elevated and you can just look around, even if it's a couple 100 meters above the surrounding landscape, being up and looking down, seeing the horizon go off on all sides. Damn boy.
I agree. I would say, though, as someone who grew up in Nebraska and Minnesota, like real mountains are superior, but there are metaphorical mountains in nature that you can conquer too. So it's like in Nebraska, you got the dunes, you got the sand dunes out west. You've got these huge expanses of land. In Minnesota, you've got things like the Lake Superior Trail, where you can hike for a month along the Great Lake. Like if you don't have a mountain, don't use that as an excuse. Find a mountain, go out there and conquer some shit. Ideally, you're going to conquer yourself in the process, but at the very least, you don't need to fly to Nepal and like make it this big thing. Just go out and
you should, but you don't need to.
You should, but go out and do something hard and stop bitching about the lack of mountains. Like, I don't want that to be an excuse for someone like, oh, I don't have mountains near me. I don't care. Go out and
just exert yourself in nature. Exert yourself in nature.
100%.
Or you can make a trip. Like you make a trip.
Yeah.
You can go somewhere.
Well, that's why I kind of said the guys in the Midwest or flatter areas of North America. You can go to the Rockies, Appalachia, wherever the other mountain ranges are in the States.
It's a one-day drive to a mountain. Basically, in the Midwest, you can get to a mountain in a day. Well, if you're in Nebraska, you drive out to the Rockies, or if you're in Missouri, you drive out east or whatever. But there's a mountain within a day's drive. Yeah. It can be done.
And it kind of dovetails it. I was having a conversation in Jiu-Jitsu the other night with a 20-year-old, and I think he was just settling into adult life, and he was like, just goes on, like day after day, just goes on.
Oh, like, sweet summer child.
I was like.
Oh,
but I think he was reacting. I think he worked in IT, and he was getting his like every day. Okay, well, I guess I get up and go to work and do the like thing every day, and it's and I do jiu-jitsu, and that's about it. And he's like, life seems boring, and I was like, well, you have to make it exciting. I mean, you have to like you can add a story. You have to find your story. I mean, not everyone's going to pull a Bronson and just go get lost in India for like a year and a half. But like, I mean, that's an adventure. If you think about like, I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Like, what is what is a good story? Like, what's a good adventure? How in peril do you have to be for it to be a good adventure?
A bit.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, you definitely have to. There has to be some danger or like something hard. But
I mean, I was gonna say that exactly that. Obviously, not advice for first time people or like first season of people going out hiking, but I've reached the point where if there isn't a hint of like, oh fuck, it's not worth it to me. Like peaks that I can honestly just walk through a field that there's a nice trail the whole way up. I'm like, yeah, it's beautiful up here, and I'm happy that I went out and that I got this peak. Every peak that's a check off the list is great, but I love the hikes that feel the best, that I think the most of, are ones where getting that last bit of the peak, there's some technicality to it or exposure. The feeling of exposure when you're holding on to that rock face and you glance over your shoulder like you shouldn't, and you're like, if I misstep, I am falling to my death. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That's when it's like, yeah, the overcoming feeling, not just the, I'm somewhere pretty, I like it here, it's nice, I can enjoy it, but that sense of overcoming. And then you find a logbook in the summit cairn and you unscrew that iron cap or that plastic cap and you unfurl it, and it's like, I'm the first person to do it this year, the last signature is like 2020. It's like, fuck yeah, that's the feeling.
Yeah, and then you get into like actual mountaineering guys, which is a whole different level. Like
that's another level far above me.
There are a lot of moments like that I had when I was in Utah, because everything is so steep that you're like, whew, that's not cool. And then I remember specifically being up really high, and I was just trying, I'm just trying to get cool pictures somewhere. And I'm like seems like it's better up there. And I'm trying to crawl my ass up where this thing is this. Lucy always says I'm going to die in influencer's death. And I just need to get this shot.
Quite a few of those around my area, actually.
Yeah, no doubt. But and then I actually was one where I was like, this is foolish. Like I should not, with my camera hanging off the side of my back, that I'm climbing up, trying to pull my body weight up over this thing, and there's a sheer cliff beside. I'm like, this is foolish. Stop. Yeah. And then because it's Utah, 3 guys climbing up the sheer face of that mountain like 1,000 feet on ropes. Just come up where we're like, hey, how's it going? Like random middle-aged guys, and that's a whole nother level of that game.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
like that mountaineering. Yeah,
that context is so interesting too. Like I've got some clients who do mountaineering and things like that, and obviously it's a very challenging pursuit, but it's a very technical one as well. Like it's a whole new skill set, and it's just funny to see that in application. Like you're like struggling and you're puffing up this hill or your mountain, you're scrambling, and then someone with ropes or crampons and all this tech and skill set just like flies past you. It kind of reminds me of an inverse situation I had when I was in Northern Ireland. I was climbing this mountain with a friend. He's like, we're like, yeah, it's supposed to be a cool mountain and not too hard to climb. When we go climbing up the side of this mountain on the coast of Ireland, up through these boulders and scree fields and stuff like that. And we like scramble. It's like 4 or 5 hours been scrambling up this thing. And we get to the top and it's covered with like families and children and tourists. And we're like, where did you come from? Turns out there's like a trail on the other side and everyone just like walks up. And there's something to it about being like prepared and having the technical skills, and that in relation to the effort, it's like, the effort is laudable, but so is actually thinking, planning, and preparing. Like there's more heroism in effort, but also maybe planning, preparing, and getting your skills right is the more mature decision.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. You don't want to send people out for a 3-day alpine through trek for their first hike.
Yeah, and you shouldn't do stupid children. You should not do the stupid things that I do. Like twice in the past year, I stayed too long at the summit or wherever I'm going to. I did this out in Arizona recently, before it got hot, and I because I'm trying to get those golden hour shots up at the top. And then, I spend 3 hours climbing down the mountain in the dark. Yeah. With my cell phone, like trying to figure out where the trail is and it's all cliffs and stuff, and I'm crawling and putting my hands into things, and there's scorpion, like terrible. I mean, that's the adventure. I mean, it's definitely like, well, that was
an adventure.
Exactly. Look how you're talking about it now.
But like, it's a
You need a head
adventure,
torch,
but you
need a little headlamp.
Yeah. Well, no, I sure I had 3 at home. I mean, I know about those. I just, I thought I was going to be back in time, as I always do. But then I did this in Utah a bunch of times too. Like, because then, once you get there, then you stay for the good pictures, and then it's dark.
Yep.
But
that's how it goes.
Yeah. And usually you can use your cell phone and it's fine for most of it. But, especially if you're smart enough to bring a battery charger, which is another thing. That's kind of a must. For a lot of these things. Bring your extra battery charger because your cell phone is going to die. It
is always better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it.
Yeah. That'll get you through a lot. And the other thing I will say is that I think we maybe talked about in the group is that, like, I will definitely say that the All Trails app has saved my ass.
Yep.
A handful of times. Point where, like, because it has GPS on it, it'll tell you if you go off trail. Like, you're like, oh, well, because you can, easily wander off, a mile in the wrong direction at any given point. And it's told me when it's gone off trail. And also, like I said, in the dark, trying to find where the trail is, it's helped me and things like that. Because, it's when it's dark out and stuff like that, you're like, where is anything? You're just like pointing around. So having that has definitely been a really good benefit. And it's also easy to look things up on it. I'm not being paid by All Trails or anything. I actually pay for a membership for that. That was the one I bought that membership before the one where I got stuck in climbing down for 3 hours. I had literally bought the All Trails membership that day. Like, it's like $30 a year or something. I'm like, okay, paid for that. That was money well spent.
Nice. A great one I can recommend as well for anyone who's like, listening to this and is like, I'm going to go start hiking mountains. I use both Gaia, just Gaia. Yeah. And FatMap. FatMap is really, really cool because it has like the Google Earth 3D. So if you swipe up with 2 fingers, it tilts it, and it'll still from a distance give you the names of the peaks on it. So if you can essentially set it to your vantage point, and you're like, hey, what's that peak over there? And you can zoom into where you are, tilt it back, tap on a mountain, set a banner, zoom back out, and see, okay, it's that. And then it'll give you the route up to that peak if you want. So it's a brilliant app. I love it. And that's the free version. There is a paid version. I haven't bothered with it. So yeah,
very
good stuff. Everyone get out there, go find your nearest peak or pick a spot that you want to go hike around in. It's what's a flight in the States? If you want to go from one of the flat states to one of the mountainous states, I think you can fly around the States you can probably get 250, 300 round trip flights.
It just depends. Well,
still probably easier to drive.
These days are not, things aren't really stable. So like, it could be, you could pay $1,500 to get to Florida, which I did last year, or you could pay $200.
Okay.
So
yeah,
it
fair
just depends
enough.
on what's going on. But yeah, I mean, like a lot of the closer flights do tend to be like, pretty inexpensive. It just depends where you are in the country and how often people fly into that airport from your airport is basically is basically how it works.
It's intriguing to me because it's more expensive for me to fly to Halifax on the other side of Canada than it is for me to fly anywhere else in the world.
Amazing.
Like, yeah. Oh yeah. $1,500 for me to go Vancouver to Halifax.
Yeah.
Versus what? I can get a good like $900 discounted rate down to see you.
Yeah.
Josh.
Hey.
To see Josh?
Well, because I wanted to point out that it's an even further one. I could probably fly down to Arizona for pretty cheap.
Yeah, probably, yeah. That's true. It's just hub to hub. That's what it is. If you can get hub to hub, in the same way that it's easier to go to Iceland, because it's along the route that they go over to Europe. Like, you can get easy flights there because everybody kind of goes over that.
I wish I was as into
travel. I'm off to Melbourne today and need to start getting ready for that.
Okay, you're going to Melbourne?
Yeah, heading to Melbourne in a couple hours.
Melbourne. Melbourne. There is an R in there. Melbourne. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll wrap this up.
Right
I
on.
think that we covered a lot of ground, so to speak. So that's I think this is good. Hopefully, people enjoyed it and got to meet you guys a little bit and see some of our cool members in the Order of Fire. And anyway, all right, guys. See you later.
Take us in your adventures.
Wonderful.
We want to see them.
Thanks, Jack. Thanks, Josh.
Cool.
Yep.
See you later.
Talk to you guys later.
Stay solar.
Stay solar.
Stay solar.
Pater is the cultural arm of the Order of Fire. For more, visit PH2T3R.com.